Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of our AM Minnesota show. May, I know it's not May, but tomorrow it will be. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and every year, I don't know how long we've been doing this. Do you know how long we've been doing this, Eric?
I would say
It's been a
15 years.
Probably.
Yeah, at least 15 years, yeah.
Eric Lundin is a licensed psychologist. I always get the psychologist and the psychiatrist mixed up. I think I said psychiatrist earlier.
Yeah, don't ever call me a psychiatrist.
You don't like that, huh?
No, they're fine, but I'm not anywhere near being a medical doctor.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I always get it confused. But anyway, you're a psychologist, and you work with the Rice County Mental Health Unit, right?
Yeah, social services. I'm celebrating 29 years this year.
Wow.
I know.
That's amazing.
I know, it's kind of crazy, but I've loved it. It's been great to serve the people of Rice County.
And typically, you've chosen the topic that you want to talk about on the show.
Yeah.
In response to Mental Health Awareness Month, and today you've chosen post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good time to talk about this. They're making advancements in PTSD and how it's treated, and often it goes undiagnosed. And I think this is a way to get some awareness out there about PTSD.
Now, most people, when they think of PTSD, think of the military. That's where you hear about it the most.
Yes, indeed.
But you and I can suffer from this.
Anyone can suffer from this. Any kind of physical abuse, being under, having a sexual trauma, rape, being in a fire, car accidents, anything where you're put in a situation where you're in a life-threatening situation, or if you know someone who was in a life-threatening situation, or if you witnessed a life-threatening situation by someone else, could all give you post-traumatic stress disorder.
Does it always have to be a life-threatening situation?
Well, actually not. There can be a thing called developmental trauma, where if your parenting is such that where you were parented in such a way where you may not have gotten all your needs met as a young infant before the age of 2, you could also suffer some of this post-traumatic stress disorder. If you witnessed physical violence in your family and that kind of thing, all of those things could potentially create some PTSD. The good news is that only 15% of people who suffer a traumatic event will eventually have PTSD. So that's the good news. The bad news is if you don't recognize it, it can affect you in so many ways. So.
And I'm sure it resembles other things.
It does. It can. I mean, you can have a lot of what we call other diagnoses that go along with this, such as anxiety, depression.
Right. Just because I'm having nightmares after some event doesn't mean I'm suffering from PTSD, right?
Right. But it can be other symptoms can be that you can also suffer all these other symptoms as a result of PTSD, such as anxiety, depression, sleep problems, nightmares. And so we can sometimes diagnose both the PTSD and an anxiety disorder or depression.
I know we're here to talk about the general population, but I'm going to take a wild guess that it's higher than 15% in the military.
It is, but I'm sorry, Gordy, but I don't know
That's fine.
I don't know the statistics on that. All we know is that we're seeing more and more and more of that for our veterans who are coming back from the Middle East.
Than we did, for example, in World War II. However, maybe we didn't, have a definition.
Well, we didn't have a good definition of it. They just called it shell shock in 1945.
Right.
And so they suffered, and a lot of them ended up suffering in silence and moved on. But if you look back on some of these veterans that go to the war memorials, you can tell that they still have very fragmented, difficult memories of the war. So
it's not a human thing to be involved in that. I mean, we're not supposed to be involved.
No, we're not. I don't think we're not wired really to kill other humans. We're wired to kill saber-toothed tigers and other things, but we're not really wired to kill each other. We're wired to connect to other humans. And so when you have to be trained to do it, and then to actually have to engage in that. That is one of the other areas that can cause PTSD, is the actual act of killing someone. It's called sort of a moral this moral deficit or moral difficulty that we go through.
We're going to take a little break. Eric Lundin is with us. He's a licensed psychologist with the Rice County Social Services Department in their mental health unit, right?
Yeah, we have 3 outpatient therapists that serve folks who have no insurance or limited insurance. And also our non-documented population, we also serve those folks too. So we service people who can't access mental health in other ways. It's a wonderful job.
People just call Rice County Social Services if they're in one of those categories.
Yep, and then they can call, and they'll call Katrina, and they ask for services, and we get back to them.
Mayo Clinic defines post-traumatic stress disorder as a mental health condition triggered by a terrifying event, either experienced or witnessed. It says symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety.
Yes, those are some of the symptoms. Also, avoidance of things. Like, let's say you were in a car accident on Highway 60. You decide you can't ever go down Highway 60 again. That would be an example of avoidance of a certain stimuli.
Oh yeah, my niece got in a very bad accident, hit a bridge on an icy road, and she couldn't drive for a couple weeks after that.
Right, and I bet she definitely did not like bridges.
Right.
Yeah. So, but like your niece, though, this brings up an important point, that she eventually was able to drive over bridges again. And so she suffered from what we call maybe an acute stress disorder, but not PTSD.
Yeah.
And that's where most people fall, is into that category where you're going to have some symptoms after a very distressing event.
It's natural, right?
It's very natural to have these kinds of feelings and emotions. But for most of us, thankfully, they do go away. But for others, it doesn't go away. Usually when we're in a distressing situation, we do one of 3 things. We either fight, we flee, but finally, if we're overwhelmed with distress, we freeze. And this is where our brain gets into trouble as far as PTSD. Because as we freeze, then our memories become very fragmented, and we can't get a coherent narrative. We can't really tell the story. Our brain shuts down. We can't remember things. We become amnesic, and thus these memories are like held in our body. And so that's part of why we end up with PTSD from a biological standpoint.
I always call memory one of God's greatest gifts, but if it's a bad memory, it's probably not a great gift, right?
Right, and we have to remember that all of us probably have remembrances of bad memories, okay? And so even in the treatment of PTSD, we don't lose the memory. You don't lose the memory, but the memory makes some kind of sense to you at the end. You define it, it's defined differently in your brain, rather than this thing that's acted out or through anxiety or use of chemicals, which is there's a huge correlation between those who are chemically dependent and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh, we're hearing a lot about the opioid epidemic in this country.
Right, and so I don't think there's any research yet on whether all of those opioid epidemic folks have had PTSD, but my guess is a certain subset have.
Right.
And they quickly become addicted because it's a way to sort of just numb out from whatever emotional distress you're having. So.
We talked about the flashbacks, the nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
We have some physical ailments that come about due to this.
Yeah, you can have things such as fibromyalgia, back pain, neck pain. Lots of times, folks who have back pain and neck pain also have an underlying PTSD diagnosis. People with stomach disorders, people diagnosed with ADHD actually may be actually misdiagnosed and actually have post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's just a variety of different illnesses linked to traumatic events in our lives.
Yeah, well,
partly because we just hold those memories instead of being in the narrative part of our brain, and I won't go into the whole what the neurological processes are, but just for simplifying effects, just they're in the traumatic memories are held in our body in some way, and so that's why many of these symptoms come up.
So what are the treatments? You said there's some new treatments.
Well, I think the main treatment we're going to talk about today is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, otherwise known as EMDR. But before that, there are other ones. Simply learning to practice your breathing in such a way so that you can relax is one thing. Simple learning to breathe helps a lot.
See, I thought you'd say group discussions with people who have also been through a traumatic event, where you realize you're not the only person that suffered.
Yes. This is actually now counterintuitive. That it sounds like that would be the right thing to do, and we thought that for many, many years. But what happens is people's brains, these memories are held on the right side of the brain, which, as we know, is not the verbal portion of our brain. So when we simply talk about something that's happened to us, we simply feel re-traumatized.
Oh.
And so talk therapy is not necessarily
helpful.
Because of that. Because we just simply are not, our brain is not prepared to talk about something that hasn't been worked through. I know that's hard to explain, but talk therapy is not necessarily the best thing anymore. Yoga, believe it or not, in veterans administrations all over the United States, they're practicing a lot of yoga. So which makes sense. You're doing a lot of breathing and a lot of body work. And another thing we've heard about a lot is mindfulness, which is this learning to just focus on our breath, focus on an external stimuli that just is relaxing, imagery work. All of these things can help learn to regulate our body and our emotions, which is critical than before you might do something called eye movement desensitization, which is this processing where you move your eyes back and forth, okay, and at the same time you're thinking about the negative memory. So you're thinking about this terrible memory, and then your eyes are moving quickly back and forth with a therapist. And you do this like for 30 or 40-second intervals, at which time, for some reason, which is not completely known, they have some theories, the memory loses its intensity. And this is because it's called, the other term we call for it is called bilateral stimulation. So now the brain is working on both sides. It's moving back and forth between the left and right hemisphere, back and forth, back and forth.
Just by moving your eyes back.
Just by moving your eyes back and forth. It's also done with vibrating pieces in your hands. And then the vibrators move back and forth between the left and the right hand. And you close your eyes and you image the memory, a very specific memory. Now, I do not recommend doing this yourself in any way. You have to have a therapist that will help you through the process. There's like a protocol that you go through to make this work. Now, some people, it might be like a year of therapy before you'd actually get to the fact where you actually process the memory. Other people, you may be able to do within 3 or 4 sessions of first meeting the therapist. So, but this holds a lot of promise for PTSD. Also, there's some medicines out there for nightmares called Ptsd. That's one that the psychiatrists are using for nightmares caused by PTSD, and that has shown excellent benefit. So these are some things. Ptsd, yes. I think it's Prosasin.
This has to be prescribed.
Oh yeah, you need a psychiatrist to prescribe this. And I think it would be important to have some therapy along with that if you're going to be prescribed something like that. So.
But the group therapy's out.
Yeah, group therapy is out. And that was really when the Vietnam vets first started, that's all they were doing was group therapy. But that's all we knew was talk therapy.
Yeah, they were reliving the event over and over and over, is
right.
what you're saying.
And so, and it wasn't until probably about 10 years ago that we finally decided that talk therapy wasn't going to be the treatment of choice. Now, there are some talk therapies out there. If clients are regulated enough that work, it's called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and that has a whole way of, they go through this whole thing, but it really actually includes a lot of breathing, a lot of relaxation that's included in the treatments. So they might call it talk therapy, but there's a lot going on with the body.
Well,
So-
we touched on it earlier. Eric Lundin is with me from Rice County Social Services. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Yeah.
Earlier we touched on the fact that you can suffer from an anxiety, but not necessarily have PTSD. So how do you diagnose it?
How do you well, partly we do, there's some testing, little tests we can give. We can get what we call an ACE score, an Adverse Childhood Experiences test. And this is a test of 10 questions that talks about your childhood. And there's strong correlation between the number of adverse childhood experiences you've had and whether you might have PTSD. So these things are such as being slapped, hit, verbally abused, having one of your parents be intoxicated or having used drugs, witnessing domestic violence, or having one of your parents go to jail, or maybe having one of your parents removed. All of those things that are affected. And they've correlated that if you have 6 of those out of 10, I don't think I described all 10, but if you have 6 out of 10, your chances of having a reduced life, your entire life, is by 20 years. So when you think of people like Freddie Mercury, Janis Joplin, those people all had adverse childhood experiences score of 6 or more. And Jimi Hendrix, all those folks died early, and it's may not necessarily been by accident that they did. That many of them had drug overdoses and those things. And so you attribute it to that, but my argument is that the PTSD probably had something to do with it. So getting back to your question about anxiety, is a person can have anxiety without having had those. So we rule out the PTSD, and then you simply can treat the anxiety by itself.
I mean, virtually all of us would suffer some type of anxiety in a situation that we've been describing, right? I mean, an auto accident, a fire in your home. I can think of a lot of things.
Yeah, lots of those symptoms are going to occur initially, and then eventually they just kind of go away. Like I said before. With time, they go away. But you were talking about just a person diagnosed with anxiety.
Correct.
People can have anxiety without PTSD. And then that's great treatments for that. I recommend non-medical treatments. Some of these, benzodiazepines, they have great short-term effects, but they don't do anything for your long-term learning of how to overcome anxiety. So I encourage people not to take those.
Is depression part of this?
Yes, depression can easily be a part of PTSD, especially a type of PTSD called complex trauma. And that's where we touched on that earlier, where complex trauma is where you've just had a long series of traumatic events in your life, where you were sexually abused, physically abused, tortured, in captivity, you name it. When you've had something happen over a long period of time, then you have a thing called complex trauma. And that's where depressive episodes are seen almost invariably. Those folks are depressed and often have chemical dependency issues as well.
So you can't confuse the two, you're saying? When you're diagnosing somebody for PTSD, it can't be masked as something else. I mean, it is either PTSD or it's not PTSD.
Right. Yeah. You either have PTSD or you don't. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so we will rule that out often by just asking, were you ever hurt physically, sexually, or verbally as a child? Did you ever have a terrifying event? We just ask some simple questions, and a lot of those people might have had those events, but they don't suffer the symptoms. Then you have to see if they've had the symptoms as well before
they may have suffered one of those events and not even realize that it affected them.
Well, that's the other thing, is that they often don't get affected. I'm working with an individual right now who it wasn't until he went to prison that a therapist said, "Hey, you've got PTSD." And then that has opened up all kinds of doors for him since he's gotten back, and he's doing much better.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you want to rehabilitate him in prison, right?
Right, but I think and he did have some access to services there, but most of his services in therapy now have occurred while he's been out. So, but he was initially diagnosed there, which was very helpful. So, that was good.
That was good.
Yeah.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left in the show. You doing anything special for Mental Health Awareness Week over at Rice County Social Services?
There's a walk, and I think it's the third Wednesday. What's the third Wednesday of
May?
Of May.
I'm looking at a Twins calendar.
Okay.
The third Wednesday of May is the 16th.
And I believe that's when the May is Mental Health Walk is occurring. And they'll start right across from Grandpa Al's, of all places, where the new Friendship House is. And a shout out to the Friendship House folks who are listening in today. That's our mental health clubhouse.
And they're listening?
They're listening today, yeah.
Wow.
And so they're going to have a walk on May 16th. I think it starts at noon. And they have a little discussion first, and then they have a little walk to help us all recognize that mental health is something that's treatable, it's available, and it should not be stigmatized. So
I'm guessing, like depression, exercise is probably a good thing in this too.
Oh yeah.
In terms of therapy and helping yourself.
Yes.
Get mentally strong.
Exercise cures a lot of things. Exercise in depressive symptoms, exercise is better than antidepressants after 4 months. So for the first 4 months, antidepressants outperform exercise. But after 4 months, exercise outperforms medicine. So get your exercise. And it doesn't take a lot.
Another thing that our bodies were wired for, right?
Exercise.
Being active. Exercise.
Right. Yeah, and we just don't do enough of that anymore. Hey, I wanted to say something about Supply Our Children. Our annual wine and cheese event is occurring on May 11th at the Bacharach building from 4 until 7. $15 tickets gets you 2 glasses of wine, access to door prizes, and the options to work with a wine wall and make bids on that and potentially win extra wine. And also there'll be silent auction items, and that's May 11th at the Baccarat building from 4 until 7. We serve about 1,200 children every August, delivering backpacks. It's a great program, and we'd love to see people come out to our event.
In fact, Faribault High School graduate was inducted into the distinguished alumni that was one of the originators of that.
Yes, Martha Schultz, who is still one of the people that's still working very, very hard with the Supply Our Children program. In fact, she's the head of it, and she continues to do such great work.
That is a great program.
Yes, it is a great program. The line goes out the door, and these folks appreciate it so much that we're able to support their education, and it just goes to show how many people really support our kids in Faribault. Mm-hmm. It's a great program.
They say it takes a village.
Definitely, it takes a village, and it takes all of us to be a part of it.
To raise kids.
Yep.
Takes a village. What are we going to talk about next year?
You got any ideas, Gordy?
I don't know. We'll have to get closer to it.
Yeah, we'll have to get back. We'll have to think about that.
We've covered a wide range of topics over the years.
We have. We might have to. Might be at the point where we start recycling.
Yeah. Well, we probably have already recycled.
Yes.
I can't imagine there being too many more topics to discuss.
No, I think we'll recycle back to depression or anxiety. Maybe I'll do something on anxiety next year.
In the realm of mental health,
just on anxiety is a mental health illness, but it's so treatable if we can just know that we need to move toward the anxiety and not away from it.
Have
So
you
that
ever-
would be the emphasis of it.
Have you ever had patients who suffer from anxiety and they had no reason, they didn't understand why they were suffering from the anxiety?
Yes, that's called panic attacks. So when you don't know what the anxiety is about, you're having a panic attack.
Oh, okay. I always
Yeah.
thought something would trigger a panic attack.
Well, something often does, but the person doesn't
Realize.
recognize what it was that triggered it. And so you can have, when you don't know what the anxiety is about,
That would be
it's
scary.
about panic.
I would think that would be very scary.
Right.
If I'm in a bad car accident, I can kind of understand if I'm suffering from anxiety that's normal.
Right.
You're just in a bad accident.
Yeah.
You're going to be suffering from this
Right.
for a while.
Right. So that's good. That you worry a little bit. The worry helps you prepare and be alert the next time you are in the car.
Yes, there is good anxiety and bad anxiety.
Right. So anxiety serves a purpose up to a point, but then we rely on the anxiety over and over and over again when what you should be doing is taking action.
Right.
So
So anxiety. We'll have to remember that.
yes, I'll do anxiety next year. It'll be a good
Anxiety
program.
next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Well, thanks, Gordy.
I'm not anxious, but the show is coming to a close here in the next minute. It's
Yeah.
always good to see you.
Yes, always good to see you too, Gordy, and thanks again for supporting May as Mental Health Month.
May 16th is that event. you
I
said.
believe it's May 16th. Yep. And it's a fun little program, and you go for like about a 1 mile walk, and there's a speaker. So
Is there more information on your website?
yes, there'll be information on the Rice County website, and you just look under social services. You should be able to find it.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Take care, Gordy. Bye bye.
Eric is a licensed psychologist with Rice County Public Services and with the Mental Health Unit. We appreciate his stopping by and getting us educated on post-traumatic stress disorder. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota on KDHL AM in Faribault, Minnesota. Have yourselves a terrific day.